So in this segment, we're going to be talking about that guy again, the Cheshire Cheese Man, and this is like the third or fourth time I think we've spoken about him this year because he's gotten a bit famous because of the fact that he's struggling to export his goods to the EU as he did before Brexit. So he's been very vocal about his kind of frustration with the British government to the point where they had told him, "Oh, why don't you set up a hub in the EU?" And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's how you're gonna be able to export things, around the EU easily by setting up shop in France," which he did, I think, in the end. So, exclusive, British cheesemaker says Brexit and the subsequent trade deals have cost his firm £270,000, and his is probably more in the medium kind of business rather than a small business in terms of the amount of money that he does make. But yeah, £270,000 to a medium enterprise is a lot of money. British cheesemaker who predicted Brexit would cost him hundreds of thousands of pounds in exports has called the UK's departure from the EU single market a disaster after losing his entire wholesale and retail business in the bloc over the past year. Simon Spurrell, the co-founder of the Cheshire Cheese Company, said personal advice from a government minister was to pursue non-EU markets to compensate for his losses and proved to be an expensive joke. And I'm Bengali. My parents are from Bangladesh, so I asked my mum earlier today, day of recording, do Bengali people eat cheese? Because when I went to Bangladesh about 2016, I didn't see anyone eating cheese, and it's more of a luxury over there, which is very expensive, as she told me, because they struggle to get fresh milk out there, so they're going to struggle to make cheese. And I'd assume India, they have paneer, which is a type of cheese, but I don't think they'll be the biggest fans of Western cheese. Same with Pakistan. They talk about the Indo-Pacific, which is this area here, India and the Pacific region. It's like this kind of area, and I don't think cheese is that big in these kind of countries. I mean, Japan are lactose intolerant, well, a lot of people in Japan are, so cheese won't be consumed there very much, despite the fact that we can now sell them more Stilton. I'm sure the Japanese government are like, yeah, sure, people are going to buy that over here, of course, because they physically can't consume it. It will make them ill. So they talk about these countries here, and, cheese isn't consumed that much here. So, no, there aren't, cheese is more of a Western thing than anything, at least. I don't think it's that big in Africa. I could be wrong. If there are any commenters that live in Africa or of African descent, like, is cheese a big thing culturally in food? Like, I don't think it is. It's definitely not in sort of this area of Asia, the Indo-Pacific, anyways. So, yeah, this man was never going to be able to go to emerging markets and stuff because he's selling a product which isn't popular and is seen as a massive luxury. Just insane. It turns out our greatest competitor on the planet is the UK government, because every time they do a fantastic deal, they kick us out of that market, starting with the Brexit deal. So I think he's talking about the EU, but it's a bit of a confusing statement he's made there. But they kick us out of that market. Like, as you talk about, like, the trade and cooperation agreement sucks because it kicks us out of the EU. Like, it's a bit of a weird statement he's made there. If anyone can kind of clarify that one, feel free, but I find that one odd. Spurrell predicted in January that Brexit would cost him £250,000 in sales. He says, "We lost £270,000, so I got one thing right," he said, describing the post-Brexit EU trade deal as the biggest disaster that any government has negotiated in the history of trade negotiations. Now, that, I don't mean this in a way, it sounds like something Donald Trump will say, "This has been the worst trade deal in the history of trade deals." So, yeah, has it been? I mean, it's the greatest trade reduction agreement that we've ever seen. So, yeah, I suppose it is. His online retail business was hit immediately after the Brexit negotiator Frost failed to secure frictionless trade, addressing sales to individual customers in the EU. And the only way he would have been able to do that is if we stayed in the single market and the customs union. So he was never going to get that. Spurrell said he had lost 20% of sales overnight after discovering he needed to provide a £180 health certificate on each order, including gift packs costing £25 or £30. He said the viability of his online retail had gone to a dead stop, because this is a guy who, what they'll do is they'll sell packets of cheese like this, and so you need a £180 health certificate, so that was never going to happen. It's not viable. Not to mention there are customs fees as well, which the person buying the product would get hit with. After he embarked on a personal crusade to draw attention to the plight of UK exporters involving almost 200 media interviews around the world. So this man, got very famous of this. I'm not intending to say he intended to be famous, but he was one of the few businesses that very publicly said, "What the hell are you guys doing?" He was invited to an online meeting with Victoria Prentice, a minister at the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. But surely he should have been speaking to the person in charge of trade, who was then Liz Truss. She suggested emerging markets could compensate for the Brexit-related hole in the Cheshire Cheese Company's finances, and there are lots of problems with this statement. First of all, like we've mentioned, cheese is not that popular in certain countries around the world, the Indo-Pacific and others, right? That's your first problem. It's very expensive over there, and if you talk about emerging markets, you're talking about a very, very, very poor working class and a very, poor middle class by Western standards. They're not going to be able to spend £4 or £5 on cheese. It's a massive luxury. Cheese itself is a luxury in the West, but it would be a massive luxury over there, something you'd have maybe once a month at most. So telling this man to go for emerging markets doesn't make any sense. I suppose there is Latin America, but they have their own kind of cheeses. Ours would be seen as more of a luxury, more than anything. So again, what are you talking about? Sparrow said he pursued new business in Norway and Canada, which he always could have done. He always could have done this if he wanted to. I don't know how popular cheese is in Norway, but Canada also has a very strong cheese market. They all have a lot of cheese manufacturers over there. So, again, asking him to compete with Canada, on top of the fact that there will be customs checks on the cheese going in, and vet checks as well, potentially, depending on what Canadian rules are, don't make any sense. Brexit trade deal sealed by the government had put barriers in place, which is true. It's absolutely true. And, arguing with this geezer, this person, Prentice, arguing with this geezer, shows you she's out of her depth because she has no idea. She has no idea. The default settings for the government are, have you tried emerging markets? Or why don't you sell more domestically? Those are the two things the government has. Or they'll blame the EU. So 3 things. Now we've also lost Norway since the trade deal, as duty for wholesale is 273%, and we tried Canada, but what the government didn't tell us is that duty of 244% is applied on any consignment over £15. So he's having to pay a tariff, I'm assuming, of 244%, which massively takes you out of that market. It means you cannot, physically you cannot operate in that market. Why? Because the Canadian government have set it up like this because they don't want foreign exports or foreign imports of cheese undercutting domestic farm producers. So it's not hard to figure out here. The CETA deal was unpopular with Canadian farmers because they didn't want to compete with European cheese. That meant Canadian consumers who ordered a pack of £50 worth of cheese, including transport fees, were asked to pay £178 extra in duty when the courier arrived at the door, Sparrow said. As you can imagine, customers saying, "You can take that back, I don't want it anymore." Could you imagine having to pay almost 4 times more in customs duties and fees? So it'd be an import tariff, really, for product that's a luxury. No one's going to do that, and it's obvious people are going to say no. The moment that customs agent goes to the door, they'll be like, "Nah, bro, we don't want that." Norwegian duty on a £30 pack of cheese amounted to £190 extra. I mean, it's just ludicrous. But that's the state of play where they don't want foreign exporters to undercut their market. So what do? They price you out of the market completely. That's what's happened here, and each country can do what they want. Each country has the right to protect their borders how they want in terms of goods, import of goods. And the simple fact is, we're mugs because you've priced yourself out of so many markets now. It's unreal. Europe's already a massive manufacturer of cheese. If they have to pay more for British cheese, they ain't going to do it. Only certain few, maybe some Brits will, and some people have a real taste for cheddar and Stilton and things. But for the most part, I think European countries can make enough different variations of cheese to the point where the UK actually imports 2/3 of its cheese because that's how great European cheese is. Sparrow is now pursuing the domestic market with greater vigour, but says the cost of marketing has gone through the roof because all the competitors are having to do the same. And what that means is the ad price goes up because you have to bid on ads. Before we could sell across the EU, now we're all fishing in the same pond. We used to be the biggest online seller, but now we're absolutely bombarded with attacks by all our cheese rivals because they're all buying the ads on Google to try and beat us. Hey man, I'll do you can do me a sponsorship if you want. These are competitors who would never have bothered us before because the market was that big. Everyone can kind of compete with each other without having to compete with each other properly. But now they're in a much smaller market. I think Europe's got like over 500 something million people. The UK 66 million people. That's a much smaller market. The sad thing Sparrow said is that it is the small to medium-sized companies such as his, important employers up and down the country, have been hammered by Brexit and other trade deals struck by the government rather than giant rivals, because they can set up shop in other countries to do exports from there. He noted the Canadian company Saputo, with a market capital of more than £8.3 billion, has done well out of the Norwegian deal, as producers of 3 of the 4 premier cheeses signalled out for significantly reduced tariffs. Now, it could be that they've lobbied the Norwegian government for this. That's possible. So that's going to be interesting to... It doesn't say in this article why they managed to get away with it, but it's quite interesting this big business got away with it. For the most part, but it's the small and medium enterprises that can't really do it. Maybe they argue that the cheeses they're selling don't really compete with Norse cheeses because they're different. I don't know. But what I do know is this has hit, small to medium enterprise a lot. We'll be talking about a bit more as kind of the year starts, because I've got a big backlog of like content I need to cover. So some of these will be older videos from this year. So it just depends. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Brexit has hit this man very badly, and if I were him, I think he set up shop in France. I would continue with that operation. That European market is way bigger. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.